Revenge office stories. They called her deadweight and fired her in front of everyone she'd ever trained. What the new bosses didn't realize was that she held the only key to their entire operation. When she walked out the door, their $100 million plant went dark with her. Now, this story has become a modern corporate legend. While the names and details have been changed to protect the, let's say, guilty, and the events are best described as a cautionary tale rather than a documented incident, the lesson it teaches is very real. It's the story of how one non-essential employee brought a giant to its knees. To understand how it all went so wrong for them, and so right for her, we have to go back 3 months to the day the new boss walked in, thinking he knew it all. In the world of big industry, you've got the people who run the meetings, and you've got the people who run the machines. For 30 years, Barbara was one of the people who made the machines run. She wasn't just an employee at Midstate Utilities' flagship plant. She was its living, breathing manual. That plant, a gleaming $100 million testament to modern engineering, was a maze of pipes and turbines, and Barbara knew every single inch of it. She'd been there when they poured the concrete and had helped write the first operational protocols that were its lifeblood. Her official title was Senior Operations Expert, but that's like calling a master watchmaker a time-telling associate. It just didn't capture the depth of what she knew. She knew the specific groan a bearing made a week before it needed replacing. She could diagnose a pressure dip just by the hum it made in the control room floor. Her colleagues, most of whom she'd trained herself, treated her with a mix of awe and real affection. If a problem seemed impossible, the unofficial rule was simple: go find Barbara. She was a creature of habit. Her desk was this funny little island of analog in a sea of digital. While everyone else had sleek tablets, Barbara had a series of meticulously organized binders. They were filled with hand-annotated schematics and obscure regulatory codes most engineers didn't even know existed. Her younger colleagues would gently tease her about her hard copies. "Barb," a junior engineer once asked, "you know we have encrypted email now, right?" Barbara just smiled. "An email can be deleted," she'd replied. "A fax confirmation stamp from a federal office is forever." It was that mindset the new leadership would so catastrophically fail to get. The beginning of the end arrived in a pair of expensive sneakers. His name was Brent Whitaker, the new chief operating officer, hired from some trendy tech startup to disrupt and streamline. Brent was the kind of guy who talked in buzzwords like he was being paid for it and thought corporate culture was just software that needed an update. He was young, arrogant, and saw the plant not as critical infrastructure, but as numbers on a spreadsheet. On his first tour, he walked past Barbara's desk, saw her binders and old-school printer, and saw everything he thought was wrong with the company. He didn't see expertise, he saw inefficiency. He saw what he called legacy ballast. That phrase became his favorite weapon. In his second week, he held a town hall and stood in front of a slide with a giant pie chart labeled Legacy Inefficiencies. "This," he announced, "is what's holding us back from next-level synergy." Then, in a moment of stunning disrespect, he pointed right at Barbara. "Like our old permitting workflows. Why are we still using physical signatures in 2025? It's archaic." The room went dead silent. Everyone knew he was talking about Barbara. She was the one who insisted that certain high-level authorizations required a wet signature on a physical form that was then faxed and sent by courier. It was a security measure she designed years ago to prevent a catastrophic error or attack. To Brent, it was just a bottleneck. Barbara didn't even flinch. She knew there was no point explaining federal compliance to a man who thought an energy protocol was just an app. She understood what Brent needed, a villain for his story. And Barbara, with her binders and her fax machine, was the perfect fit. The marginalization started small. First, she was accidentally left off key emails. Then her security badge would mysteriously stop working. The final insult was removing her from the plant's major upgrade committee, a project she had laid the groundwork for. Her team was furious but helpless, watching Brent's hand-picked innovators make changes to systems they barely understood. Barbara saw the writing on the wall, but instead of getting sad, she got methodical. At night, she started her own project. She went through her binders, creating a personal file of every system, every protocol, and every single point of failure she had spent her career preventing. She paid special attention to one document, the Master Authorization Agreement with the Regional Power Utility. Tucked away in a subclause she herself had helped draft was the critical detail. For security, grid activation required authorization from a single, designated primary compliance contact. Changing that contact required a signed, notarized form, co-signed by the outgoing person. And the company's one and only contact? It was Barbara. Her firing was a masterclass in corporate cruelty. It happened on a Tuesday in the middle of the control room. Brent called an impromptu huddle. Flanked by two uncomfortable HR reps, he announced they were eliminating roles that didn't align with their dynamic operational vision. Then he looked right at Barbara. "Barbara," he said, his voice cold, "your role has been identified as redundant. Today will be your last day." The air went out of the room. Two security guards she knew by name apologetically handed her a cardboard box. With calm grace, she packed her few personal things, a photo of her late husband, a world's best grandma mug, and a small plant. She left the binders. She left the keys. She left everything that belonged to the company. As she walked out, she paused and looked back at her team. She made eye contact with a young engineer whose panic was obvious. She gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't a smile of defeat. It was the smile of a woman who knew a secret that was about to become a $100 million problem. As the heavy door clicked shut behind her, the new era of mid-state utility began. It would last exactly 3 weeks. What Brent and the executive floor failed to grasp is a lesson many corporations learn the hard way. The most important people are often the ones you don't notice until they're gone. If you enjoy seeing a toxic boss get exactly what's coming to them, do me a favor and hit that like button. And make sure you're subscribed, because you're not going to want to miss what happens next. For a few days after Barbara was forced out, a deceptive calm settled over the plant. Brent was in his element, striding around like he'd won a war. He saw her empty desk not as a gaping hole of knowledge, but as a victory. Her binders, the plant's real operating system, were unceremoniously tossed in a recycling bin. Brent's new team of ambitious yes-men took over. They thought the plant was a simple machine. Press a button and flip a switch, power flows. They were about to learn it was more like a living thing, and they had just fired its brain. The first tremor hit a week later. The utility company needed to do some routine maintenance, requiring the plant to power down for an hour. It was a total non-issue, something that happened a few times a year. In the past, Barbara would have handled the whole thing seamlessly. This time the task fell to Todd, a guy with an MBA who had never been in a control room before. The plant powered down. The utility did its work. An hour later, they gave the green light to bring it back online. Todd, armed with his tablet and a confident smirk, tapped the icon to initiate the startup sequence. Nothing. A few error messages flashed. Grid access denied. Authorization pending, then vanished. He tried again. Same result. Muttering about a software glitch, he called over a veteran electrician named Dave. "Hey," Todd said, "the grid connection seems buggy. Can you check it?" Dave typed a few commands and shook his head. "This ain't a bug, son," he said flatly. "This is a lockout. The grid isn't talking to us." Todd laughed nervously. "What do you mean? Just get us clearance." Dave just shrugged, a perfect, unspoken, "I told you so." "We've got the hardware. We ain't got the clearance." Just then, another manager ran in, his face pale, holding out his phone. "The utility company just emailed," he stammered. They say they need a sign-off from someone. Todd, snatch the phone. The email was short, brutal, and in all caps. Grid activation requires primary compliance contact authorization ASPR Agreement 7B4. No other requests can be processed. Primary compliance contact. Todd said, bewildered. Who's that? Find them. An hour of frantic searching. Turned up nothing. It was like the role didn't exist. Finally, a junior IT tech, digging through archived server data, found an old PDF of the original utility agreement. He scrolled down to the appendix. There it was, under the heading Primary Compliance Contact. A single name, Barbara Monroe. The realization hit the control room like a physical blow. The news shot up the chain of command, with each level of management adding a new layer of panic. Within 2 hours, the problem landed on Brent Whitaker's desk. He initially dismissed it as incompetence. Find her, he barked into his phone. Call her. Tell her she missed a step in the handoff. But there was no handoff process to miss, because no one had ever asked. That afternoon's emergency board meeting was glacial. The CEO, a man who usually oozed control, was there in a golf pullover, his eyes promising murder. I have reviewed the activation failure. The company's $1,000 an hour lawyer began. Your grid integration failed due to a lack of primary authorization. He paused. Your file lists one name, Barbara Monroe. A heavy silence fell. The CEO leaned forward. You're telling me we can't turn on our own building until she approves it? The lawyer nodded. That is correct. Brent's voice was a panicked croak. But she's no longer with us. We assumed. No one updated the designation with the utility, the lawyer cut in. And according to the contract, that designation can't be changed without a signed, notarized handoff from the outgoing contact. It's a federal requirement. The CEO turned his head slowly, like a battleship turret. He locked his eyes on Brent. You fired our operating license, he said. It wasn't a question, it was a verdict. The plant wasn't just offline, it was a hostage. And the only person with the key was the woman Brent had publicly humiliated. Every hour the plant was dark, cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The $100 million asset had become a $100 million paperweight. They had two options, a legal battle that could take months, or they could call Barbara. The CEO looked at Brent, his face a mask of fury. Fix it, he hissed. You broke it. You fix it. Make the call. Brent stumbled out, his bravado shattered, his hand shaking as he dialed the number for the woman he had called dead weight. It rang 3 times. Then a calm, steady voice answered. Hello. Barbara was in her garden, pruning roses when the call came. When her phone rang with a number she knew was from the company, she didn't feel anxious. She didn't feel vindictive. She felt nothing. She wiped the soil from her hands and answered with a placid, hello. On the other end, Brent Whitaker sounded like he was chewing on rocks. Ah, Barbara. Brent Whitaker here. Look, there seems to have been a small oversight. A bit of a system sync issue. Barbara just waited, letting the silence hang. We need your authorization to bring the plant back online, he finally choked out. Barbara paused for a beat. My authorization? She asked, her voice a perfect picture of innocence. But Brent, you said my role was redundant. I'm just legacy ballast, remember? Surely your new Agile team has this handled. Using his own buzzwords against him was a scalpel-sharp jab. Listen, Barbara, this is serious, he pleaded. The plant is down. I see, she said, and then she delivered the legendary line. Well, that sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. I'm a private citizen now. My consulting fee is $5,000 an hour with a 4-hour minimum, payable in advance. Let me know if you'd like to schedule an appointment. And with that, she hung up. The boardroom exploded. $20,000 just to talk to her? But as the legal team reminded them, it was their only option. The money was wired in under an hour. 4 hours later, the CEO himself called. "Barbara," he said, "you have our attention. What will it take?" This was the moment she had been preparing for, not with malice, but with cold, hard logic. "I have a list of non-negotiable conditions," she said calmly. First, a public apology. Brent Whitaker would have to read a formal apology, written by her in the main conference room, in front of the board and her entire former team. Second, her reinstatement, not to her old job, but to a new role. Director of Systems Integrity and Regulatory Compliance, reporting directly to the CEO. Her authority on these matters would be absolute. Third, her salary would be quadrupled, with a guaranteed 5-year contract and a massive signing bonus. This wasn't about greed. It was about valuation. They had called her worthless, so now she was setting her price. Fourth, and most important to her, Brent's hand-picked team was out. Her original team of veteran operators would be reinstated to their full duties under her command. The board listened in stunned silence. They argued, a 400% raise? But every hour they debated, the losses mounted. The story was breaking on financial news networks. Their stock was starting to slide. They were trapped. They agreed to every single demand. The apology was a masterpiece of corporate theater. Brent walked to the podium, his face ashen, and read from a piece of paper. His voice trembled. "I, Brent Whitaker, offer a profound and unreserved apology to Barbara Monroe. My decision to terminate her employment was based on a catastrophic failure of judgment. I use terms like dead weight to describe a woman who is, in fact, the bedrock of this plant's operations. My arrogance and ignorance have cost this company millions. I was wrong. She was invaluable. I'm deeply sorry." When he finished, one of Barbara's engineers started to clap, then another. Soon, her whole team was giving her a standing ovation. Afterward, Barbara walked calmly to the control room. She logged into a terminal, her fingers flying across the keys. She entered a long alphanumeric code for memory, then spoke a single passphrase into her phone for biometric verification. A moment later, a stubborn red light on the main board flickered green. "Grid connection established," the system announced. A low hum filled the building as the $100 million plant came back to life. The fallout was swift. Brent Whitaker was fired that same day, his career as a disruptor in ruins. The story of Barbara's quiet revenge became a legend whispered in break rooms everywhere, a modern fable about the dangers of arrogance. Barbara, for her part, just went back to work. She ran her department with the same quiet precision she always had. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was respected, she was valued, and she was finally paid what she was worth. Her victory wasn't loud or angry. It was surgical, using the company's own rules as a scalpel. It proves that competence is its own kind of power, and true influence doesn't always sit in the corner office. Sometimes it sits quietly at an old desk, in the hands of the person who knows how everything actually works. The person they call outdated right up until the day the lights go out.